What's going on, everybody? I am Bird Dog John. Thanks for joining us today. And we are going to kick things off here. It is 1 a.m. in Melbourne right now, and that is exactly where I am. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Robbie to the show. What's going on, man? All right, let's see. Hey, what's going on, Judson?
Hey, thanks for having me.
I do much more. We are joined with Bird Dog Ian, who is at the Capture Summit over in Atlanta. So how's it going, man?
Hot and sweaty.
That's the most important question that our team can ask. Why are you needing this camera?
Now, I haven't tested this thing since it got here. This is something that I'm really excited that NDI did. That's cool. Obviously, there are lots of flavors here, but this is the 4250 line. And our little friend here. Say hello to my little friend. It's brewing in the back of my throat. Based on the recommendation of Senseless, we're going to give a Java Monster a try.
Oh, yeah, Pocky,
We
dude.
got a little Pocky, and
Yes.
I have been putting this off for an age.
Oh, I'm so excited for you.
There is a Snacks on Stream mystery box brought to you by my Snacks on Stream manager, Brayton. What's going on, Bugsy?
There you go. What's going on? Bali, good to see you, man.
What's going on, NetHab? Hey, what's going on, Judson? And hey, Kevin, good to see you, man. What's going on, Jeremy? How are you? Thanks for jumping on. Oh, it's all good. Well, it's that time again. Hopefully you are doing well. Let me get rid of this start screen. What's going on, everybody? I am Bird Dog John. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate that. And it is a exciting time over here at Bird Dog. If you are paying attention at all, we are really excited to announce that finally NDI5 for cameras is out of beta. It has been long awaited. And so here we are on a bright and bushy-tailed Tuesday morning here in the States. Yeah, big day for us, big week. We're super excited, and also a bunch of other stuff that we should probably clue the community into. First off, I have multiple guys that are under the weather and multiple guys that are not in the office because of that and other things. And so we've been down a few people this week and desperately trying to catch up. And so much so that we've one of my new hires started yesterday, and he is in the office this week getting up to speed on everything NDI. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Changed my so anyways, yesterday I won't even shiny object. So we're working through tickets mostly. For those of you who know Senseless, he has been under the weather for a few days now, and he's my primary ticketing guy. And so it's all hands on deck. When that guy gets sick, we all jump in and try and answer as many tickets as we possibly can, because we need to catch up to speed. The other ticketing agent that I have just got married like a week or so ago, and so he's off on honeymoon. And we are feeling his absence, even though he's pretty much brand new. He does shoulder a fair bit of the load, and so it's a little tough when he's out, and then the main ticketing guy is out. So we're all jumping back in. It's like the good old days when I was doing all the tickets. It's not true. So we've got a couple of other guys that are also covering tickets, and then I'm obviously conducting training and a few other things for our new hire. So good stuff there. But it has been a busy time here at Bird Dog. So with those guys out and sick, and us trying to cover those items, we haven't been as progressive with some of the things that we wanted to get done here over the past couple of weeks, but that's okay. That's the way things go. We'll soldier on here for a few days. In particular, however, I did change. Of course, my studio is evolving over time, and that's all well and good. I've added a screen, so I got rid of the Blackmagic video monitor, because we use that thing for testing. We like to use third-party monitors, especially ones that we have no programming control over, and might be the reason why we're designing the core. But anyways, we use here at the office, we have a Ninja 5 from Atmos, and then we have a Blackmagic 12G, SDI HDMI monitor, basically, that we test a lot of our stuff on to make sure that it's functioning with third-party products. And so, as we all know, Blackmagic is a developer, and they swim in their own lane, let's say. And so, it's great if our stuff works with theirs, because that is good stuff. So let me anyway, so I took the Blackmagic out of here. Man, I'm having a hard time staying on topic today. There's a lot going on up here, folks. So I took the Blackmagic out of here, and I put in a TV monitor that I had from home. I brought it in. It's been just kind of like a backup monitor that I've had for a lot of times. What I've done though is I've taken a Flex out, and I've output the multi-viewer from vMix in an NDI stream. So it's output 3, and I'm sending that to the Flex out, and then the multi-viewer is now on the screen, so I can see all of my shots, and I don't have to constantly be looking over at vMix anymore. They're all right there in front of me. So I need to raise it up a bit. I got to find some more like defunct boxes that we don't use, and like it's really kind of bojank right now. But anyways, we'll figure it out and get it situated correctly. But hopefully, we can get that squared away. Now, more changes to the NDI workflow. So, in collaboration with the NDI world and multiple manufacturers and NewTek and NDI and all of those guys, we have learned that NDI5 seems to be a bit more stable with flow control turned on. Okay, so those of you who are into the networking side of things, and also who are running robust NDI networks, you'll know that generally on the NDI outputs, flow control is turned off. Okay, but in this instance, and this is jumbo frames, is what this is. But in this discovery, we've noticed some better performance with flow control turned on, which is actually a Dante setting that is fairly regular, with flow control turned on and the frames maximum set to 1500. Okay, so no jumbo frames allowed. Basically, 1500 is not considered a jumbo frame, but setting flow control on and setting the maximum to 1500, and then applying that to all ports on the switch. That is actually a change that I have made here on this switch. Now, there's a lot going on in this network, and it's not perfect yet because my fiber. So if you've joined us on previous shows, you know that this computer now runs with a Sonnet box that has a fiber PCIe, 10 gig PCIe card in it. And I'm running LC fiber multi-mode over from here to actually my server room and then coming back. So vMix is taking all the cameras. I've got 4 or 5 cameras in here. It's taking all those signals and putting them into a 4250, and that's going over to my main switch, and then it's coming back here over fiber onto this computer. So this computer isn't actually plugged into the 4250 that's here on the ground anymore. From a networking standpoint, it goes over there, but it goes over fiber, and it's 10 gig, and it goes into a 10 gig switch over there. And so, speed is everything, right? So all of that data is now going back there and then coming back here. And I think to do it correctly, I need to trunk that switch, or I need to fiber that switch now to the fiber core that's in there. So anyways, changes need to happen. You may notice some frame drops. That is still a thing, but we get better all the time. And this actually, that flow control option that we're kind of testing right now with the NDI5 stuff is proving to be an interesting change, because that's a fundamental change. If you're on the networking side of things, it's a fundamental change to the way things go. So yeah, there's that. Welcome to my world. In the past week, in the past 7 days, I have heard 2 predominant production people, one from NDI itself and one from a guy in the production world, talk about NDI independently and oversimplify it. And it makes my skin crawl, because that is if you've spent any time with me, you know that I love a well orchestrated NDI network, and we don't do ourselves any favor, and the NDI industry, it's in and of itself, because there's marketing out there that just says, oh, you just plug in the camera to any network you have and it just works. Yikes. So that's a problem. We don't want to spread those sorts of things, because it sets up an expectation in a customer's mind that NDI doesn't require any like horsepower, and it's a high performance video standard. Like it's definitely going to require something. So the beautiful thing is the recommendations that I have are also echoed in the New Tech University course. And so if you go and take that course, wait around for New Tech to have like a promo code because it's a little expensive without it. But if you take that course, they're saying the same things I'm saying. And we actually came to those conclusions independently. I didn't consult them, and they certainly didn't consult me. And so we came to those conclusions together. And the course is taught by Kane, who is a predominant employee over at New Tech. I think he's with New Tech or NDI. I can't remember. Anyways, super great dude. Really knows his stuff, really knows his installations. And what he says in that course is exactly what I say. And so I'm confident in that assessment about my NDI networking. But as you know, if somebody oversimplifies it, especially somebody who has like lots of followers, and they say something in public like, yeah, it just works on anything. It's like, oh no, just stop. And it's getting to the point where when people say things about how to configure your NDI network and they oversimplify things, saying, oh, it's just, it's just safer to do it this way, or it's just easier to do it this way. You can kind of gauge pretty quickly what their experience is with NDI networking, because it becomes pretty obvious by the way they're recommending you to set things up. So anyways, so rant over. Not going to go down that road any longer, because today is a big day. NDI5 is officially a public release. It's no longer in beta status. It's been in beta status for like a month and a half. We were really hoping it was going to be like 2 weeks, but people wanted to try it out. And there are lots of folks that were saying, I'm not going to install it in my production until you move it to public, which would obviously give us a level of confidence that you've ironed this out. So we wanted it to stay in the beta realm a little longer than what we typically do. And that's just to make sure that it's, we go through the hardening tests that we need to. We have a brand new QA guy who is spending all his time doing cameras now. He's kind of gone into that subsection of just cameras. And then we have another guy in Australia who then backs that up. So he does the tests as well. And we get two guys looking at stuff and they report back, and that has created a really robust system. So I'm really excited by the way that our QA department is kind of like organizing themselves, because it means that we have a great system to catch the majority of stuff that may slip through our previous processes. And so hats off to the engineers, and hats off to the QA guys. They've worked like dogs to get that firmware to the state that it's in. So the latest firmware is 64, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I am going to do a brief overview of NDI5. Now that it's out for cameras and it's official, I want to show you from top down the UI, and I want to show you where you navigate to things. It looks different than LTS, and so let's go over that. We'll do that in a minute. But first, I need to catch up on the chat. You guys are just going over there. Of course, Go Web here right at the beginning. How are you, man? Namaste from India. Hello from Michigan. Appreciate you jumping on. Hopefully you and Sanaya, your daughter, are doing well. Good morning. So what's on the agenda? Well, today the agenda is we're going to talk about the NDI5 stuff, and then I'm going to turn it over to the general group and talk through. I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Obviously the NDI5 stuff, we need to go over the new things that NDI5 kind of introduces, especially from an installation standpoint, just so that you know what's expected with NDI5. But there we go. That is what's on the agenda. Whoa, what's going on from Stockholm, Sweden? How are you? That's good to see you again. Thanks for coming back. So I'm going to have to Google this after the show, because I don't want to butcher your name, but you have letters in your name that I'm not sure how to pronounce. And so I want to be careful, and don't want to assume that I know, because I definitely don't know. So I'm going to Google that after the show. And then hopefully next time when you jump on here, I'll actually be able to properly say your name. I assume it's a Swedish name, but correct me if I'm wrong at any time. I'm not going to certainly sit here and try and butcher it a dozen times live on the stream, with you be like, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. No, I know that's what's going to happen. So I will translate it and try and get it as close as I can in like Google Translate or something, and then you can correct me after I do a little research, because that's who I am. I'm going to research things before I butcher it. Hey, I didn't get that hair light plugged in. Dang it. NetHab, you're absolutely right. Let there be light. NetHab, thank you, my friend. I didn't get it plugged into the power strip, which is actually on the other side of the table, and so that's my bad. Totally my bad. And gosh, that's like 3 shows in a row. Brutal. All right, well, the hair light is now on. So it's just I get too excited about the colors on this show now. And then I got RGBs. I love the little the blues and the greens, but anyways, I get a little ahead of myself, I guess. Can help if you need extra hands. I can help if you need some extra hands. I forget what I was talking about back there. I'm sorry. The good old days. We love Blackmagic products as well. That's good. Blackmagic, they definitely have a market. There are certain spaces where people won't venture into the Blackmagic era or Blackmagic products, which I believe they're trying hard to change that mentality. But that goes back because of history and a bunch of other things. And so I've had conversations with installers who won't do it yet. But they have a market and they have good products that are perfect for several situations. And so no harm, no foul there. Remember that Bird Dog covers like small installs in studios like this one. And then we go all the way up to like, big broadcasters and stuff like that. So everybody has their flavors. What's going on, Judson? How are you, man? Good to see you. Flow control is for TCP only. It should not have any effect on the UDP or RUDP. Potentially. We're testing that actually right now. It shouldn't, but you never know. And the guy, one of the guys in Melbourne was talking with the lead developer for the profile. One of the things that he kind of relayed was they spent like a ton of time working on the NDI4 profile, and then NDI5 came out, and obviously they had to like catch up. And so he had said they didn't spend as much time on NDI5 as they did NDI4. Granted, a lot of the legwork was already done, so maybe that's why. But anyway, they're still finessing the NDI5 stuff, and so this flow control thing may be one of those pieces that changes because as the protocol evolves, as things do. Obviously, we want things to arrive in time and in sequence, but we also want them in the full NDI realm. We want them to arrive as fast as possible. So for those of you who are playing along, Bird Dog is a full NDI process, which means that we're only interested in the lowest latency. It's a high bandwidth requirement, but it's low latency, and that's all good. Hey, from what's going on, iPhone? Good to see you again. Warsaw, Poland. Always good to have you on the show. Thanks, man. Hello from Ghana. Hey, how's it going, Isaac? Thanks for jumping on. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being a part of the show. Thanks for spending some time with us today. So I'm running 4 Bird Dog P200s feeding directly into Wirecast. We'll have to define what you mean by directly. For a live show every morning, we're dealing with an annoying, persistent skipping and jumping phenomenon on all cams throughout our live feeds. This could be a flow control issue, as you've been describing. With NDI5 help resolve this issue, my tech engineers are pulling their hair out over this. Actually, if you're using 4 P200, would you say 200s? If you're using 4 P200s, I would highly suspect the NIC card on the Wirecast machine. If at all possible, connect another NIC card to it. Give yourself 2 gig throughput at least, because although NIC cards say they are 1 gig, that's called peak performance. That's not average performance. Average performance, we're probably looking at something closer to 500 megs or maybe 6, maybe. But peak performance is usually what the marketing guys use. And so if they say 1 gig ports on every port on the switch, they don't mean at all times at every moment of the day. They certainly do not. The average for a 1 gig NIC card anymore is probably half value. And so I had that same problem. I'm using vMix in this instance, But I had that same problem, and the issue I was having was stuttering. That all of the frames were stuttering. It was almost like couldn't process all the packets that were arriving. I plugged in 2 additional NIC cards to this computer, and lo and behold, I have no issues getting the frames into vMix anymore. And NDI5 in particular, will do a great job in balancing, load balancing over multiple NIC cards, load balancing the NDI protocol. So try multiples and maybe 2, maybe 3. I mean, especially if they're those these guys, these like dongles things. These are unreliable, by the way, in a high performance network. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but if you just want to test it and see like this is just USB to Ethernet, you can just give it a go and see if it quiets the frame drops, and then if it does, then find something that's super consistent. Now, I went from 2 NIC cards, so 2 gigs on here, to a 10 gig fiber card that's running inside of an enclosure, and I do not have any problems with packets arriving now. That's for show. My problem is CPU usage, which is why now I'm running 2 computers to get this show to function as I expect it to. So we have a play demo today as well. I hope you didn't forget. I totally did, and I didn't even update my play, so we're gonna have to do that on Thursday. Let me write that down so I don't forget, because my play is not up to date. So like I was mentioning earlier in the show, what's going on here? Like I was mentioning earlier in the show, my guys started getting sick last week. So the plans that I had. All right, play demo on Thursday. And I'll even put it in the title so I won't forget for next week's for the Thursday show. So my guys started getting sick last week, and they've been falling like flies here the past couple of days. So one of the guys that's not feeling great, he's actually here, but he had the flu shot yesterday, so that makes sense why he's not feeling great. But yeah, good times. So my apologies, but I've written it down, and I'll make it a Thursday show, and we'll go over play and see how it works. So, the phonetic spelling is, oh geez, hao kaan kaan. See, I'm gonna butcher this. I'll research it for you. I promise you, I will. You know what? Well, yeah, no, I'm going to research it for you. I won't do it live right here, but I will definitely do it. I really appreciate the help, though. That gives me something to go on, at least. That have just done. Just done. Just done. Just done. See, this is what happens when I don't get through the comment section fast enough. Then I don't know what I said. Okay, so hey, so what card do you recommend, please? Are you talking about the 10 gig card? So I have the one that I'm using. Just don't try 10G on Windows. Okay, so all right, so what card do you recommend? So I am using a Sonnet box, and I believe it's a 10G Tech card that I'm using. Obviously, I'm not touching a gig like over a gig, or it's like 1.2 or whatever. But I'm using, yeah, I believe it's a 10. It's a dual. It's a dual SFP plus 10G Tech, which I've actually had great results with them. They're kind of like an aftermarket thing, but their SFP mods seem to function really well, and their card is functioning well. I have one at home as well, actually, in a machine that I should bring it in. Ooh, I should definitely bring it in, because if I bring it in, I could have 4. I don't use it at home anymore. Totally should bring it in. That'd be amazing. Wow, I just nerded out on that big time. So yeah, I just found it on Amazon, but it was not terribly expensive, and it has dual SFP plus 10 gig ports. But NetHab makes a good point. Don't try 10G on Windows. So if you don't know what he's talking about here, we discovered that Windows 10 with a 10 gig Ethernet, or well, actually, it's just Ethernet though, right? So a 10 gig Ethernet card doesn't actually go above 1 gig. And there's some issue. Now, we have now discovered that there's a patch for Windows 11 that enables like 2.5 gigs on a 10 gig card. So the latest Windows patch, evidently. I haven't tested this, but the guys in Melbourne said, yeah, we had like a breakthrough the other day, and it gives us 2.5 gigs. It's kind of a problem for quad, right? So it's plenty for quad, but they found out that Windows 11, the latest update, allows for more than 1 gig. So good news on that front. Question. No problem to connect 2 NICs to the same switch. So it used to be, and if you have an older computer, it still might be a problem. But traditionally, NIC cards now all have individual MAC addresses. And that was the problem, is that you were having 2 NIC cards with the same MAC address, which is an FCC violation, by the way. So you'd have 2 NIC cards with the same address, and they tried to plug into the same switch, and the switch would freak because it was like, wait a minute, 2 computers with the same MAC address. This is fishy. So now all NIC cards usually are issued their own MAC address, including things like this. They'll get an individual MAC address, and then you can plug both of those into the same switch, and the switch will send packets thinking that it's 2 computers, and the computer knows who it is and what connections it has, and it will do the load balancing for you. So good stuff there. So it's not a problem unless you have an older machine. Generally not an issue. So let's be super brave and update the play on air. Ross, that's crazy talk is what that is right there. No, I have a pre-production model, and so it requires me to like open the case and everything and do some crazy stuff. So not going to do that, but I will. The plan is Thursday we're going to do a play show because poor Go Web, I promised him, and then I had to break my promise. So we're going to have to do that. 2 computers, no drop frames today. So I was running 2 computers the other day, but only you can prevent forest fires. No, only you can tell me if you're seeing drop frames, because I'm not monitoring the show with a server, which I guess I could. I have YouTube up, and I have a very low bit rate going on with YouTube, but it's mostly just to check the audio, and I can hear it just fine. So that's good news. But I'm not watching that. But there may be drop frames. I have no idea. I don't have any drop frames in vMix. I don't have any drop frames on my confidence monitor, which is running a vMix output for multi-viewer. And I'm not seeing anything in StreamYard, but I wasn't seeing anything on Thursday last week either, and I was totally getting drop frames. So, yeah. Help me out, Smokey the Bear. Only you can tell me. So I use OWC Ethernet RJ45s on MacBook Air M1. They work great. I'll have to Google that to actually find out which product it is that you're using, but fantastic. I really annoyed with the Macs that they have these silly restrictions with their NIC cards. Like if you buy a new Mac Mini, for example, you can upgrade for like $200 to the 10 gig port. It's like, just put that in there. Come on, man. Don't. It's so dumb. Anyway, we had a great time with Jason at Broadcast India. Yeah, he reached out to me and was like, hey, do you know this guy? And I was like, do I ever? He's on my show. So yeah, he told me that he ran into you and had a good chat with you for a while. So that's great. I'm glad that you had a chance to go over there and meet him. He's a great guy, right? I love him. So shout out to Jason for being at Broadcast India 2022. That was good. Sounded like it was a great show. Should I update my P120? Absolutely. Now that it's a public firmware, by all means, you should definitely go ahead and update. And we're going to talk about that update after I get through the comments section, which has been just bumping today. So thanks, everybody. 3 cameras with NDI to stream the output at 60 frames per second. Is there any hardware, specifically computer, that I need to have specs-wise? The bigger, the better. So obviously you can spend whatever you want. Depending on what you want to do with those streams. So like if you're saying I want to do ISO recording, yeah, we need to talk about specs. If you're saying I want to run vMix, i7, i9, 16 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs, 500 gig hard drive, SSD with, if you can get it, a 10 gig card. If not, a couple of 1 gig cards, 3 cameras with NDI to stream to output. So yeah, it depends on how you're switching that video, but vmix could do it pretty. Actually, vmix takes the least amount that I've seen so far, opposed to Wirecast and OBS and Streamlabs and whatever. It takes the least amount of horsepower to do that, and if you have a GPU, it's even better. So halfway decent GPU in there as well. If you're building a chassis, go with something. Well, check vmix website because evidently there are some restrictions. But yeah, if you can get GPU encoding, then it lowers the CPU, and she works really well. Like it's working all right. So I'm averaging about 60% on the CPU at all times, and I do have a GPU in here that's not my external enclosure, which I found out isn't going to work, which I'm really annoyed by. But anyways, there you go. Okay, we'll let you off. Thank you. There was a drop on the right side close-up camera a couple of minutes ago, the right side camera. So is your left my right? I can't. All right. Well, anyways, we won't get too upset about one frame. Yeah, I'm seeing drops as well. Okay, fantastic. Well, I got news for you. Not all these cameras are running they're all running pre-release betas, except for the P200, which is this guy straight ahead. But anyways, off to AVX Denver. I'll jump on the show from what's going on, Ian? I'll jump on the show from that show on Thursday. I'm taking off now. Have a great show. It's good to see you, man. And yes, I'd love to have you on the show on Thursday. So shoot me a message. I'll try and throw you the link over in once I make the show. I'll send you the link over in Teams and have you on. That'd be great. Good to have you on from Denver. And that is the end of the comment section for now. So thanks, everybody. Good stuff. Yeah, there was a super long laggy frame while you were talking about the external 10 gigs. Okay, so one of the things is I don't have 1 gig SFP ports or plus. I'm sorry, SFP mods. So I'm wondering if it's trying to travel all the way around through my network and not just pass through my single switch, which I would prefer. So I'm wondering if I shouldn't buy 4 mods and have them just all go into this switch here and everything be local instead of going into my greater network, which is also managing a bigger network over there. This network is also a part of a greater system that's running like an internet network and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm wondering maybe I should isolate it, and do set up an actual network as if I was going to do this for a client. Because I bet it would increase performance and I wouldn't have to rely on the fiber going through the fiber core over there and then back here and then back over there for internet and back out. So there's a lot going on in this office. And I haven't isolated this. I've done groups. I've done NDI groups for this studio. And so they're not touching other computers in the system. But in general, if you say no drop frames, then you're going to get a drop frame. It's true. It's going to happen right when you say it, too. And it'll be like some frame where my mouth is wide open. So it could also be the internet connection, right? Do you have one of the M4250s with SFP Plus? I don't. My entire 4250 fleet is just SFP. I have a fiber core that I think is a Ubiquiti fiber core, but that's running like the VoIP network and a bunch of other things that are happening like not in the NDI realm. So, but whatever. Okay. Yes, it could have been a number of things that caused that. Absolutely. And almost guaranteed that it's an endless number of things because I have an endless number of things plugged into this general network that's running this show. So, there you go. For a guy that preaches keep it all isolated, I don't keep it all isolated. I should drink my own Kool-Aid, which is I definitely should do it because it would probably increase the performance. No time, everybody. Oh, hey, yeah. And secondary on this show is a little little snacks on stream, we're going to try G Fuel Ninja Cotton Candy. So this is the Streamer Ninja. So we're going to have that while we talk about NDI5. All right, let's get into it here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and so that you guys are able to see exactly what it is that we are up to. But the great news is that NDI5, the actual release for the cameras, has been officially launched. It's no longer in beta, and so we want to go over some of those things. And we're going to talk about this as if we're discovering it for the first time. So I want to show you exactly what you're doing, how you're getting into this system, and what you should expect from the NDI5 interface, because it has changed from the LTS stuff. So let's jump over there. Beautiful thing is that we've revamped the NDI5 interface for this launch. And so the beta had it, and now this is the public firmware. This firmware that we're talking about today is considered NDI5 64. And so we have a actual, if you look at the firmware version on this screen, which is over here, it says 6.4. Obviously, go to the website and get the latest. This video will have been recorded in the past by the time you're rewatching this. And so if there's a latest public version that's on the website, it will be posted at birddog.tv/downloads. Be sure that you also get the correct download, because we have lots of cameras in the fleet. But one of the beautiful things that we did is that we tried to unify the firmware update to just a single file. And so the goal here is to make it a lot easier to do the update. In the past, you're doing USB updates and a bunch of stuff, and it was a big, giant headache. Well, when you get to LTS, that should, in theory, be one of the last USB updates you have to do on the camera, and now everything can be done on the web UI. So we're trying to oversimplify the updating process, because we heard from our clientele that it was a bit of a pain point to get forklift or get lifts and go up and do USB updates. And so we want to make it more convenient for customers to do this sort of stuff. And so the updates are all done on the web UI. All right, so when we want to get to our camera, we can do this a couple of ways. We can open Studio Monitor and click on the little cog on a PC, click on the cog wheel in the bottom of the video feed, or we can open Studio Monitor on a Mac and go, and it says device web page in the menu at the top. Either way will take you to the IP address of the actual camera. The other way to do it is just to open a Chrome browser and type in the IP address. So in this case, 192.168.1.23 is the IP address for this camera, and you'll be taken to this dashboard. Now, this dashboard is actually on all the time. And so if you have a closed network, you can always look at the stats by jumping onto the web UI, and you don't need to actually log in to see this information. And so I'm actually not logged in. This is the login button over here. Or if I try to click on any of these tabs, it's going to ask me to log in. But here I am right on the dashboard without logging in, and I'm able to see multiple things. So first of all, we can see what the CPU on board the camera is doing. We can also find out kind of what the network bandwidth is. So how many people are connected to this camera, and what is it outputting, and in relation to what it can do. So we're averaging about 30% for this show. I'm using this stream in a couple of places, but into vMix primarily. And then it tells us what the stream name is, and it tells us some useful information like video format, what sort of network protocol we're running on. So we're running on a TCP protocol. Our configuration is DHCP, as it should be, and where our network speeds are listed at a 1 gig connection, which is great. So it means our switch is working correctly. It's able to see the IP address. It's acquired an IP address via the DHCP server. This actual system name, so the name of this camera is birddog-studio-P200. I set that myself. Out of the gates, this will be birddog- and then the last 5 of the MAC address. So this is what your web UI should look like. Now, if you've come from LTS and you've updated to NDI5 and it doesn't look like this, open the web browser in incognito mode, because what's happened is the website has been cached. It's a website. So it's a site on a web browser, which has caching abilities. And so if you open it up in incognito mode, it'll flush that cache and open up and require all of the new data to come through in order to show it, and it'll show this correctly. Now, also be careful, because if you minimize this, you're going to get the mobile view. This is helpful on like iPads and phones, that you can actually see all this information on a mobile platform. But if it's about 50 to 60%, it'll switch to mobile view. And then as you make this bigger, it'll switch to the desktop view. Okay, so be careful while you're doing that. If you open it partially or a half window, you know how Windows does the snapping thing, you'll get the mobile view, and that's a little less convenient if you're on a big giant screen like this. So the next thing we're going to want to do is click onto one of my tabs, but I'm not logged in. So I'm going to click on the login, and we're going to put in our super secret password. If you're new to BirdDog and everything's set to default, then it is BirdDog, all one word, all lowercase, no capitals or special characters. And you can change that password if you need to secure it. But if you're doing your NDI network correctly, you probably have other security measures in there where changing that is kind of a last resort. Again, some people require it, so we offer it. All right, let's go through real quick. So we've talked about the dashboard. When you log in, you actually get a couple of other options. First of all, you get the device restart. This is restarting the NDI chip. And then you get the system reboot. This is restarting the baseboard of the camera. And so if we need to restart the NDI chip, let's say we change the resolution and we want to restart the chip just to make sure everything boots up correctly, we can do that. It's actually a really quick process. It takes only like a minute or something like that to do. The system reboot is a full reboot of the baseboard and the chip. And so that's longer. That's a longer process, but sometimes required, like if you add groups or if you're changing network stuff or whatever, then you probably should do a system reboot. The equivalent of this is a power restart. So you pull the power on the camera and plug it back in after you've saved your changes, and it'll boot up. And in some regards, that's almost desired more because the camera will reset itself to home position to 0. So it'll do the little dance and then go back to the home position, and it will then have accurate coordinates for where it is in time and space. So sometimes that's a better bet, a safer bet, because you can zero out the camera and make sure that the motor is sitting at 0. All right, so the next tab we're going to talk about is network, and this is a super critical part about installations for NDI. A lot of times, there's lots of stuff out in the world about how to set up your network. We talk about that extensively on this show. And so if you want more information about that, please let me know in the chat, and we can definitely cover more network integration stuff for mid to larger networks. But this is where you would change your network information. In particular, if you were to change it to static, you get a discovery server online and you're doing a bunch of more highly customizable networks. You could change it to static and set your information here. You can also change the name of that camera. So this is the MDNS local name for this camera. So if I wanted to open a new tab, I could type in HTTP, semicolon / and then put in birddog-studio-p200.local, and it would take me to this web UI. Okay, so you can change the MDNS name of it here. And this information in the networking world takes a few minutes to refresh, and so don't expect it to happen right away. But you can change it here and hit apply, and it will then send that report off to the network to change the name in the MDNS. And after, let's say 30 minutes, it will update. It depends on the sophistication of your network. But then you can also change your NDI networking settings here as well. And so your transport method, which is obviously the big announcement, is with RUDP, which is actually proving to be fairly good. For the initial tests that everybody's been doing with the SDK on NDI5, RUDP seems to be fairly good. Or if you're running just a standard TCP network, obviously you can run TCP here. The other piece this is where you would change it if you wanted to run a multicast network. So if you're running a lot of cameras or a lot of decoders or a lot of NDI signals, you're probably going to want to do a multicast network. We won't get into how to do multicast networks here today on this, but this is where you would change that protocol on this camera, and then you would set your multicast settings according to what your customizations are on the multicast setup here in this section, and then you would hit apply. The last thing I want you to focus on here with this networking tab, though, is this is where we indicate if we're going to use a discovery server or not. Like I've said in the past, discovery server is, I believe, supposed to be running on all NDI networks. It's kind of assumed that you were going to use it, but it actually gets overlooked a fair bit. I don't run it here, but I do have a discovery server that is installed on this computer, and if I want to switch over to it, I totally can. And quite frankly, I should. Discovery server is a way to quiet the broadcasts on the network and is critical if you're going to use static settings. So learn more about Discovery Server. I actually have a tutorial on that on our knowledge database and on YouTube if that is something you want to learn more about. That's where you would set up those settings. All right, the next tab that we're going to talk about is the System tab, and we want to just kind of go over what each of these things are, so that you are aware of what all this is. Now, this is where you change the password on the device. So you put in your current password, so you have to know that one, and then you can put in your new password, and you have to reconfirm that password, so it does a check, so that it is sure you didn't put any typos in there. Type it in twice, and then hit apply, and this is where you change that password. Now, if you change your password, it's on to you to remember that password. I don't know that password, and it wouldn't be much of a good password if I was able to crack it somehow. And so all we can do is give you Bird Dog Neuralizer, which should flush the password. And if not, we can go in and actually physically delete the file that gets created when you create a password. But we're not able to go in and actually like crack the password. And so if you change this, be sure that this is documented and distributed to the people that need to know. Because if you drive home tonight and get hit by a Mack truck, now nobody knows any of your passwords, and they got to go through all these reset options. And it's kind of well, let's just say it's a few support tickets away from needing assistance. And so we really strongly recommend that if you're going to use this feature, and it's totally fine if you do, that you at least document what it is that you're doing, and let those who need to know that you've changed the passwords into whatever that is. The system update is where we would upload the firmware file, the .fw file, for any future firmwares that you're going to do. Now, in the past, this was the system tab. This is now in the system tab on the left-hand side, and system update is where you update the system, and this is that firmware update. One of the great things that the Bird Dog engineers have done is they have now integrated the MICU update with the firmware update. And so it's a 2-for-1 deal, which means no more climbing on ladders to update via USB. And actually, it would only be in the rare case where we want to enable some massive feature and we need to do the firmware, the baseboard update, that would ever be required ever again. But for going forward, the point was to make it a simple update process. Download the FW file from our website at birddog.tv/downloads, and then take that FW file, put it in that folder, and hit upload. It will change the screen if you do that, and it will give you a readout as to what it is that it's doing. But that's where you do that. You can also notice that there's a system reboot button here. This is the system tab, and so the root to reboot the baseboard and NDI chip, that's what that is a full system reboot. It doesn't normally do the boot up dance. That's not programmed, but it does do a reboot of the processes of the entire process, and it reboots the baseboard, and then it reboots the NIC card. So, or I'm sorry, the NDI card and NIC card. So if you hit that reboot button, it's going to pause your video, and it's going to do a full reboot, other than the motor zeroing out function that I had mentioned before with the power cycle. This is, and the last box here, this is kind of getting into the realm of NDI. If you need this camera to report to IP address lists, so remote IP. So if you need this camera, for example, to appear on a subnet that's not a single subnet, and we talk about networking and other things, if you don't know where I'm at here, if you're installing this camera on a subnet that's not where your production is, you're going to have a problem finding it, because NDI just sticks to its single subnet, 22255. So if you need it to appear in other subnets, then you need to add that to the list. And what you can do is you can hit this save button, and it will download the text file that you need. You can go into that text file, change the IP addresses accordingly, and it explains how to do this in the manual, by the way. But you can change the IP addresses, resave that text file, and then re-upload it here to this spot, and that will then update this list. And you know you've done it correctly when this list reflects the IP addresses that you've listed. And so there's a checks and balance here with that. When you upload it, it'll probably take you back to the dashboard. You come back to the system tab, and you verify that IP address that you've uploaded is listed here. This is the same process for NDI groups. And as I mentioned before, I'm running an NDI group here in my office, and I call it Studio 2901 because that's the name of, that's our office, and this is the studio in that building. And so I just made that up, and I added that in an Access Manager, and I added it to my cameras, and I added it to my vMix machine, and I'm able to see the cameras that are in that group. Now, this camera doesn't belong to any other groups. And when you add a camera to an NDI group, it takes it out of the public group. Okay. So if you add a camera to there, it will disappear from your NDI network. So you need to know that before you change this. If you're going to enable groups, then it's going to disappear cameras, NDI signals from the public group and just make them private into the individual ones. So heads up. But that's where you do that. And if you click on save, it's going to bring, it's going to download that file. Actually, I'll do that here for you. It's going to download that text file. You can open that text file, change inside that text file. It explains how to do this in the manual, by the way. You can change it to your group. Be very careful about how you use or how you use capitals and characters and all that stuff, but be very intentional about that. Upload it then to this spot here, and then hit upload. And it will probably take you back to the dashboard, come back to the system menu, and make sure that your group or groups are listed here on that screen. So that's a nice little way to do that. And we kind of give you all the tools right here on the screen on how to do that. And the team has even put in a little helpful, this must be a UTF-8 encoded file, and it needs to look like this. They even do that. So that's helpful as to knowing exactly how. And again, if you come back here and it's not listed here correctly, then you did it wrong and you need to revisit the manual or come and see me on Tuesday, Thursdays at 11 o'clock. So good times there. All right. The next menu that we want to go over is the AV menu, and we're getting into some of the weeds as to what the camera can actually do. Now, I'm not going to go into setting exposure and all of that. We're just going to talk about where these functions are. If you want a deeper education on this stuff, I'm happy to do that for you on my live show, Tuesday, Thursdays at 11 o'clock Eastern time. You can definitely like drill down to specific things in camera web UIs, but that's not what I'm doing here, and that's not what I want to cover off. So let me tell you what each of these boxes and these options are, just so that you get a good idea as to what's offered. Now, a lot of these options are going to be offered in the other cameras. We're using the P200 because it's one of our most popular cameras, but some of these options will not be available, or there might be other options available in the 4K line because the sensor is bigger, more robust. And so I'm not going to get into the weeds about what every single one of these is, but just so that you can see what these things are. So the AV support tab, up here, you're going to select what you want your audio output to be, and you can loop out what the audio is on this camera. And so if this can be an output for, if you're bringing in audio into the camera, you can output that audio on the output of that little port on the back, or you can use the output for comms. And so if you switch it to comms, it's assuming that you're using the in for the microphone and the out for the headset. And then you can talk to people if you, for some reason, wanted to use comms with a P200. I mean, maybe you need another comms channel. I don't know. But anyways, if you want to do that, there it is. There is also an audio in and out gain here. Now, be careful with digital gain because it's artificial. And so I really strongly recommend you bring in the signal at full value, as strong as you can, cleanly before it comes to the camera. And that goes for microphones as well. It needs to be a balanced sound before it gets to the camera, which means that the camera won't supply phantom power to your microphone. Okay. So if it needs to be battery operated, or it needs to go to an interface or whatever before it gets there. This is also a place where you can restart the NDI chip. So device restart is a restart of the NDI chip. And so this is a place that you can do that. Now, under that box is the encode settings. And this is some critical stuff. Here you can pick whether or not you want the bitrate management to be managed by the device or managed manually. If you switch it manually, you can set a threshold with the bitrate, the NDI video bandwidth bitrate selector here. For full NDI at 1080p 60, you're running probably about 140, 160 megabits per second. And what this slider is a threshold. It says don't exceed this amount. If I crank it all the way up to the highest it'll go, the camera won't necessarily use all of that. It'll just say don't go higher than that. So people say, well, I changed it to manual. I turned it up to 100. Well, that is literally the same thing as going to NDI managed. The camera will decide what it needs. And so I strongly recommend, with NDI in general, but full NDI especially, let the camera take what it needs, and let's talk about the network ability behind the scenes, because this is really a preferred method, is to let the camera sit as NDI managed. And then you don't have to worry about what this is set at. NDI groups. So this is the group actually enabled or not? And here's an interesting thing is that this is actually not enabled right now. And so let's do this live. I'm sorry, over here. Wrong keyboard. 2901. And we can add this now to this group. I don't know if it's going to pause my video or not, probably not. But we add it to the group, and now that is actually a part of the NDI group, which explains why it didn't show up in Studio Monitor this morning. Good to know. This also can change the stream name. Now, what is that? Well, that is in Studio Monitor. When I select the camera from the list in Studio Monitor and it has the little arrow points over, it'll say cam. Well, maybe I want to make this say like primary, or I want it to say something else. Maybe I have multiple P200s that are all in the studio and they're all the same, and I do want to group them together under the same title in Studio Monitor. Well, you can do that, and I can show you that in another video later. But you can do that. Cancel this, sorry, by putting them all as the same local name and then giving them individual stream names. And so cam 1, cam 2, cam 3, and so forth. That cleans up Studio Monitor. If you open Studio Monitor, you have like 100 sources. You can clean up your cameras by calling everything p200.local and then changing the stream name. And then so when you have one category, it says p200, and then down the list, it says cam 1 through 15 or whatever you want to do. This is where you would change the video format for all outputs on the camera. So video format, you no longer monkey with the dial switch. Leave that at default. You no longer change dip switches. Leave those on default. All changes are done in the web UI now for Bird Dog cameras, and this is where you would change that. So I'm running 1080p 5994, which is perfectly fine for this show, but this is where you would change that. And this then changes the output on the HDMI, the SDI, and the NDI outputs. So change it there. One-stop shop. Super, super easy. NDI audio. Do we want to have NDI audio added to this camera's NDI stream? Yay or nay? So right now it's on mute because I'm not integrating audio on that P200 that we're using. And so it's on mute. But if I wanted to enable that and bring an audio channel into the NDI stream, you can click on analog. Now, this should be noted. Although small, this does add a bit of bandwidth requirement to the NDI stream. And so if you're going to use this function, please be aware that you're going to add a few megabits to that stream, and you should have that available. Stream to network is a way to mute the video. And so if I am to click this, it will change my video to the Bird Dog screensaver. And if I turn it back on, I come back. And so that is how that works. And you might think, why do I want that? Well, maybe you don't want the camera showing what's happening in the room 24/7. You can now program this to mute that when you're not using it and turn it back on. You can also change that Bird Dog logo to be your own logo or a black screen or whatever you'd like to do. And you do that over here. So I have the Bird Dog encode, the Bird Dog screensaver as Bird Dog. But you can also select capture and then actually capture a frame. So like somebody waving or your company logo or something like that. And then click capture and then set the screensaver to whatever it is that you've captured. And so now if you mute the stream on the network, it will go to your logo instead. This also works if for some reason you have a malfunction with the camera and it stops streaming NDI, it will revert to the screensaver, which would be your company logo, which would look very professional. This is a place as well where we select whether or not we want the onboard tally on or off. And so in this instance, I actually want it on. And so I'm going to select on. And now the red tally light on my P200 has come on because that's the primary camera that I'm using today in vMix. Genlock source. This is NDI5 Genlock. And what we do here is you can refresh this list and actually select a source on your network as your NDI5 Genlock source, which means that it locks itself to the time code of that camera. Helps a little bit with, the way things work behind the scenes with packets arriving all at the same time, being decoded at the same time and so forth. But that is where you would select that Genlock source. That's the NDI5 Genlock, and you should research that a little bit before you enable that. There are only a few resources online right now that actually explain that, but check that out. I think NewTek has some stuff on NDI5 Genlock that would be helpful there. And the other last item on this list before we talk about the update source list is this failover source. Now, the failover source on your network is if your P200, for example, fails to generate NDI and you're using it as a live output, You don't necessarily want the your logo to show up all of a sudden. You would want it to fail over to another source that's live, that's, say, like watching the same lecture, or like a wide shot. That's something safe to go back to. Well, you can set that here, your failover source. If for some reason the camera fails, or there's a network malfunction or whatever, the system, you can tell the camera, show this source instead, route this source through my source, so that it's not a dead shot. And that's just a little safety precaution, especially for those of you who are doing live production, IMAG, a bunch of things like that. You can set failover sources, and that kind of guarantees that if anything goes wrong with the camera, if it malfunctions in some regard, because anything can happen, that at least you'll always have an active source. Now, you notice that when I hit refresh a few times to refresh the Genlock source, that's what it did. I hit refresh a couple of times. I waited a few seconds, and this list appeared. Well, what that does is it sends out a broadcast and says, please give me the active NDI list for this network. What it's really doing is checking the MDNS. If you have a discovery server, it will ping the discovery server. It's doing a bunch of things behind the scenes, and so that's what the refresh button is for. And that updated that Genlock source list and that failover source list. So that's how you do that. And there's a reset button there. If you want to flush those sources, you can do that as well. And of course, apply. So after you make your changes on this screen, please hit apply, and those things will behave accordingly. Okay. Let's jump over to cam control, because this is a pretty critical piece in a lot of our devices. Now, in the camera line, this is where you're going to use the primary functions of, it's the raw functions of the camera. And like I had mentioned before, you no longer ever have to go to the OSD. You actually shouldn't go to the OSD. You should leave all that stuff in default and just make all of your changes here on the web UI. So here we go. So the first screen that you default to is camera control. And this is literally giving you the option to control the camera's PTZ function right here inside the web UI. So if you need to make a quick adjustment or something like that, we give you this little sunburst dial to control the camera very manually. It's obviously not like a joystick or something, but gives you that option to actually control the camera left, right, up, down, and diagonally if you need to. You can also turn on the OSD menu. So if for some reason you need to find the SV number, or if support asks you to troubleshoot and look at the OSD for in a certain menu, you can actually turn that on. If you watch my screen here, my video feed, you'll see the OSD turns on when you click on that. That's super handy. Basically means that this remote control is obsolete. Fantastic, because the thing was kind of a hassle to get batteries and get the IR sensor and everything correct. Now we can just do it right here on the web UI. We don't have to monkey around with that. And then when we turn this on, these arrows become the way that you navigate through that menu. So it's all right here. Just open it in Studio Monitor, and navigate through the menu that way. You can, of course, control the zoom right here. So we can zoom in, zoom out if we need to. And my iris is obviously set to manual, and so it's not adjusting while I move in and out. But you can set up your shot right here if you need to. You can also set your focus if you want to do a manual focus, or if you want to do an autofocus. Manual, then obviously these focus buttons become relevant. And if you're watching my video, I just got very blurry. You can hold these down and adjust them and finesse them if you'd like, and get them extremely precise if you want. Dial that in, or you can just run it in auto if you're going to move that camera around. Last here, there are a few options for changing the thresholds for the pan, the tilt, and the zoom speeds. So if you don't want it to zoom in or pan, super fast, or whatever, you want to set a threshold, a maximum, this is where you would do that, and you'd set them here. And then when you zoom in Studio Monitor or here on the screen or what have you, it would only go up to a certain maximum. Now, there are some programs out there that don't look at these, and so be careful if you're using third-party switching software or whatever. They may ignore these options, and you may have to set them inside those switching softwares instead. And of course, image setting reset. Now, this is what we normally do when we factory reset a device, but it is only resetting the image settings. So when you go to the OSD and you click on factory reset, it does nothing to the NIC card. Same thing here. If you hit that button, it's going to reset the coloration of the camera and set them all back to factory, which is full auto. And so if you hit reset, it's going to go through all of the settings that are on this camera and change them all to reset, to factory default. Now, this is the new 3D stuff that we've been running in beta, and there is some sort of disclaimer there that we're currently developing this function, but we showcased this at NAB this year. The using a camera in an AR space. It's actually quite cool. And so this is where you would plug in that 3D information and whether or not you would enable that as a function that you're using. So that's the 3D menu. I'm not going to go into how to use it because it gets a little bit long in the tooth. The presets. So this is where we can change it from preset memory on or off. If you say PTZ only, that is preset memory off. And that will only save presets with pan, tilt, zoom functions. If you click on camera, it's going to save pan, tilt, zoom, and all coloration. Most of the coloration, I should say. But then we say PTZ only, and then we say save 1. And now preset 1 for this camera is saved with PTZ only. Okay. So if I recall it or I power cycle this camera and it goes to preset 1, that is this is the shot that I'm going to get, this picture. You can also adjust the preset speed, which is actually the speed that between presets, but this is a general threshold and this is not per preset. Okay, so it's a threshold for all presets that you're saving. And obviously here on the web UI, you can only save presets 1 through 9. On a keyboard, you can save presets 1 through, I think, 100 or 99. And in theory, I think it's supposed to be 256, but let's say 100 just to be safe. And you can also do that inside the API. So if you can save presets through Companion, for example, I know with Companion 1 through 16 right away, but if you're using APIs, you can save up to 100. So this is where you would do some of those general functions. If you wanted to do that quick and easy, save some general presets, you can do that right here. Okay, exposure is going to obviously give you full control of the exposure of your shot. And I'm not going to go into specifics here because each camera is a little bit different based on its ability. So we're going to mode is where I'm just going to touch on these briefly. Mode is usually between full auto, manual, shutter priority, and iris priority. And then as you select those options, different things become available. And so I have it on full manual because I'm in a controlled lighting environment. And so I have a low gain limit. I have just a little bit of gain on this shot. And then my iris is set to as wide open as it can be. And my shutter speed is 1/60 because I'm shooting as 1080p 5994, which is basically 1/60. And I've turned the high sensitivity off. Okay, so these are settings specific for the P200, but the exposure is where you're going to get your general lighting control for your shot. And if you're running in full manual, your camera should not be doing a lot of zooming because it won't adjust unless you want to manually set every single shot every single time, which would be, some people do that, and that's totally fine. White balance is where you're going to set the white balance levels for your shot. And so I have a specific Kelvin rating that is being output from my lights. It's actually in the 5,000 realm. And so I have adjusted this accordingly. But there are some preset options in here. Full auto, if you really don't know what you're doing, totally fine. But indoor, outdoor, one push, ATW, which is basically an auto white balance option. Then there's a full user manual option, which is what I'm running. There's an outdoor option, an outdoor auto option, an SVL auto, an SVL, and then SVL outdoor auto. So it kind of gets whatever. But for what this camera can do, we don't do Kelvin on Sony sensors because that's not information that we are given. It's we'd have to do like a little pseudo trick. So on Sony sensors, we get we can do this as a full actual white balance user. This is basically full manual, and then I can go in and adjust based on my coloration. Word of warning here, turn off your colors and just do your white lighting when you're balancing and then add your colors afterwards. That is a lot easier. Okay, picture 1. This is where we're going to change some of the detail stuff of the picture. And so with the P200, we're given things like sharpness, effects, which is just black and white or off. Noise reduction, which is available on most cameras, which is the actual how the blacks behave, especially if you have a really low lit in a dark set, you're going to get a lot of noise. And so you can adjust that a little bit here. This is where we can flip the camera upside down if we need to. And this is where that should be done, not in the web or not in the OSD, but here on the web UI. And we can also flip the camera back and forth if we wanted to mirror the camera for some reason. And then on the P200, you're given contrast options as well. For picture 2, which is not available on all cameras, we're given things like the IR filter, so on off if we want to manually turn that on, the chroma suppress, highlight compensation, and the actual mask settings for that. Backlight compensation, if I've got a LCD wall behind me or something like that, you can turn that on and try and compensate a little bit because it's going to make your subject totally dark. The stabilizer, which adds 1 frame of latency, but it also crops the picture a little bit. But if you have like an HVAC system that's causing things to shake, it helps a little bit with that. And then, of course, your gamma settings, which is another, it's not true black level, but it can assist with black level if needed. And then color matrix, this was added to most all of our cameras, I believe. And this is a great way to pick and choose which colors you want to emphasize and which ones you want to mute. Obviously, for me, I've got everything right down the middle, and that's perfectly fine. I don't need to change all of that. But this is where you could finesse each of those colors on that beautiful Sony sensor, which is not offered in most other camera lines, which is why sometimes they're less expensive. And then the final page is also not necessarily offered in all cameras, but it's the advanced line. And this is where you can adjust things like a brightness compensation. You can do things like the actual gamma offset, which I actually use a little bit here, but you need to turn on the video enhancements for most of those functions with the exception of the gamma offset to work. So the camera control menu on the P200, that's a general overview and super helpful. Now, one of the last things that we added with NDI5 is the scopes tab. And it's really expensive to get an actual scope on a video line, right? Like you have to buy a specific product. Well, we did you a solid here, and we allowed you to use scopes on your actual NDI feed. So you're setting up your shot, and this is before the show, and we want to see how the color is playing out on the actual picture, because monitors can be deceiving, especially if you're using non-calibrated monitors or computer monitors or something like that. It can all be deceiving, but you know what your scope should look like for the actual shot, and then we can adjust the colors based on that. Well, what you can do here is you can turn on a scope now on all Bird Dog cameras in NDI5. You can turn on a scope, which will allow you to see the actual coloration that's going on. And we can pick various scopes that we want to use. Now, a little bit hard to see this because it's over in the top corner here of the camera shot. So a little bit hard to see, but this is a histogram. We give you waveform options, which, you know, will show you the actual black levels. And then we give you an RGB parade, which is super helpful for those of you who have used these before. This is really super convenient. Of course, my greens and blues are all over the place because I've got extra green and blue in the shot. And then there's a vector scope as well. So if you're used to using things like, well, Final Cut has some, but like Adobe Premiere and a few other programs, they have these options and you might be familiar with it. You can also make the small is kind of like full resolution because we don't want to take up the whole shot, but you can make this large as well, which basically just doubles the size. And it's showing up in the actual program of the NDI stream. And so obviously we're not going to use this while the show is on. So we're going to turn this off. Well, the engineers at Bird Dog also did you another giant favor, and they enabled it just on the preview window. And so now if this shot is in preview, it will show up. But if it's in program, it won't. And that's some NDI trickery going on right there. But it's very helpful if you're using a program like vMix and you have a secondary shot that you've switched to. I can do that actually right now. So here I am in this shot, and you're using this as a secondary shot. Well, if it switches to preview, then it'll show that actual waveform. And then when it goes to program, it won't. And so that is stupid helpful because it actually gives you the ability to make sure that the colors are, as you're adjusting things, maybe you're doing this on a keyboard, or you're doing this kind of behind the scenes, you have a colorist that's working, and they don't want the actual scope to show up on the actual feed that's going out live, but they do need to see the scopes when the shot is in preview. Well, now we allow that. And one way that you can test this is you can open NDI Studio Modder, and we can just switch. Let me just go to one of these cameras. I guess I need to use my actual P200. Sorry, give me 1 second here. So I'm going to go to my P200 source, and I'm going to switch it now to low bandwidth. And in low bandwidth, now you see that source has shown up in this top corner here while I have preview enabled. Okay, so the low bandwidth version of this stream is showing that waveform. And when I turn that off, I'm going to switch that now off from low bandwidth. Now it disappears. And so the full bandwidth on that actual stream doesn't have it, but the low bandwidth version does. And so now your colorist can just look at all the low bandwidth versions of the stream in Studio Monitor, see all those histograms live. The camera can have them enabled just like it is here on the screen. But when you go live with the full value, and by the way, vMix does full value for all of its sources, so you're going to have a problem there. But if you're looking at them in Studio Monitor on low bandwidth, it will show it there. So pretty great, great little NDI tricksters they did there. But you can select whichever one you want. You can say, just show it on the preview NDI stream, and then that way we don't have to see it all the time. And the other thing is you can enable this as transparency, and it then allows you to see through the actual scope. It makes it a little bit duller, by the way, but it at least gives you the option to see it, and that's pretty helpful as well. So we can change it from large to small, which I already showed you, and then we can change that position as to where it is on the screen. So I want it top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. We can definitely pick where that is, and you can do that on every single camera. So if it's a side shot, like one of my other camera angles, well, I don't necessarily want that waveform showing up in the bottom, right hand corner. I want it on the bottom left hand instead. You can specify for whichever shot you've got. So that's pretty great there. The scopes option is very helpful. And then, of course, the login and log out button are interchangeable. So if you're logged out and you're looking at the dashboard, it will say log in. And if you are logged in, it will give you the option to log out. So that is what you would do there. And of course, our beautiful dashboard back to square one. And that is basically the full tour of the NDI5 update for the camera line. And it will look very similar on all of our cameras. If you're having a little issue where you updated from LTS and you came to the cameras, like I said before, and the web UI doesn't look like this, be sure that you open the web UI maybe in incognito mode to get rid of the cache that's in that web browser. It's just a web browser thing. The cache will refresh. It's not forever. It's just the cache hasn't refreshed yet. And so it might look like all the boxes might be off and the wording might be weird. Just open it in incognito mode and you should see it like this. All right. Thanks for joining me on that full tour. Pretty exciting stuff. And I love this little login screen. It's beautiful. So hats off to the marketing guys for making that look pretty slick. Pretty slick. All right. Well, thanks for that coming along for that little tour. Now let's jump back to the chat and see what we have going on here. So I'm going to scroll down to where we left off, and now my energy is depleted. So at 12:18. Time for some G Fuel by Ninja. It's clearly he's just being paid to stand there and look at it. 0 calories. Ooh, smells good though. Yeah, it has that artificial sweetener taste to it, but it's actually pretty good. It's, minus the artificial sweetener taste, it's not bad. I could see why you might choose to promote that, Ninja. Not too bad. I like that, actually. That's pretty good. And 0 calories per can. We'll see what it does to my energy level. If it gives me like a super high energy level and then it drops off, who knows? We'll see. All righty. Just scrolling down here to practice what you preach. This is the set up an isolated network. I definitely should, but also do as I say, not as I do. Fair enough, man. Fair enough. You should definitely not keep it isolated so you can feel the pain that the rest of the uninformed world lives in. Wow, NetHab, that's almost a little it's almost a little vicious. Wow. Will Bird Dog Nathan? Hey Nathan, how's it going? Will Bird Dog add the feature to capture photos from the app? Capture photos from the app. Do you mean the screensaver capture? So you mean like upload a photo? Is that what you mean? That's a great idea, by the way. Currently, the way that we do it is, see, on the camera, it's a little tricky. I wonder how could we do that? Because what I would suggest is I would suggest that you generate a source, like do a test pattern, for example. So download NDI test patterns, generate that source, and set it as the failover for the camera, and then stop the stream, and it should show the failover source, the test pattern, and then click capture. That would be like your logo, right? But then you know it's a proper test pattern. It's a proper size for NDI. So then click capture and then switch the screensaver to capture and then clear the failover source. And then your logo would show up there. I'm assuming that's what you mean, but correct me if I'm wrong. Really sorry if I missed the mark. What if I forget my login password? Well, as I said, don't forget your login password. There are ways to clear it. You can contact support. We can help you with that. You can use Neuralizer. It's supposed to clear that file. There are ways to do it. You're not totally up a creek, but please document. A good network admin will document everything he does, and the rest of us neglect to do that. I've been guilty of doing those things where I didn't document all that stuff. But Discovery Server, hoping that their Discovery Server won't help you with that password issue, but Discovery Server is built into all NDI Bird Dog products, and I strongly suggest that you look into it. If you want me to do a session on DS, I'll be happy to do it again. But there is a tutorial in Discovery Server over on the Knowledge Database and on the birddog.tv, Bird Dog TV YouTube page. So, starring yours truly. Is there any way to save the settings before doing an update so that if something goes wrong, we can go back to it as it was working fine? There is not a way, and I'll give you the reason why. I'm sorry, I know this is frustrating, but there is a reason. When we do a firmware update, we actually clear the memory on the camera, which is why today you saw on my P200. So I updated my camera on Monday when the public release came out, and I didn't touch it until today. And then I was putting it in groups and I was doing weird things. Well, you noticed that the group wasn't enabled. Well, that's because it didn't save that setting and I had to add it back to the group. Now, it's all good, but the reason why we do that is because we rewrite the whole firmware. We don't leave, or we don't cache, or we don't keep things, because when you do that, you cause open-end loops potentially in your programming. And so we want to wipe it totally, start over. So if you do a firmware update, realize that you're probably going to need to go through and reset up your camera, but that is to provide reliability for the update. That's not intentionally to like frustrate you. It's just more of we're trying to make sure that you have a solid update, it's clean, and you can start from ground zero. So I get it. I totally understand the frustration, or like export settings and like go back to LTS or something like that. It's not the way that it works. We don't have an export function yet, and I don't know if they're working on that. So if you have a Discovery Server running, do you still need the remote IP address list? So is your Discovery Server is, that's an interesting thought. Your Discovery Server is in a different subnet? See, initially I want to say no. I don't think that you would need it if everything's pointed there. However, I'd be curious to know, does the camera, because I don't live in this world 24/7 monkeying around in Discovery Server. Does the camera report to Discovery Server on the other subnet? If it does, I think you're good. But if it doesn't report to there unless you add the remote IP list of the Discovery Server onto the camera, I don't know if that's required. But I'd be very interested to know, NetHab. Maybe that's, when I get some free time and I'm not doing like 600 things, I will test that, because that's a great idea. This drink is brought to you by Balu, who has been a part of my team since the day I could hire people. And so I went and found Senseless, and I went and poached Balu, and I brought them over onto my team. So thanks, man. It's a good drink. So far, so good. For an energy drink that's 0 calories, all right. I think I can get on board. Point about the camera encode screensaver. Capturing a frame from a camera could add a lot of confusion for someone who is, yeah, okay. So I again, after the fact, I kind of, you're right. But I would capture a still frame. But yeah, someone seeing a still frame constantly from a camera that they're expecting to see live. That's why I would say, like, go to a company logo or like the university's logo or something like that, right? Because then it's like, if you see that logo on the screen, something's wrong, but it doesn't cause panic in the hearts and minds of the professors who are technologically illiterate. It would be really nice if you could capture a frame from another source, like a logo that looks crisp and identifies that the camera is, quote, offline from functioning and transmitting. And that is my theory about the failover source. So turn the stream off, and let it fall back to the failover source, and maybe that would do it. Potentially. I'd have to test that. It'd be a really good idea, though. And if you could just upload like a high-res photo, that's a good idea. I don't know how much memory is left on the camera after the NDI5 update, because it was a big one, but anything's possible. Maybe if it was less than like 3 megs, the photo, then potentially that's pretty good resolution. How's it going, Jose? So I joined late. Sorry if I'm repeating a question or it was already covered. The P240 ad says that it's the only PTZ that can pan, tilt, zoom at the same time. Is that accurate? Continue. I feel like every PTZ can do that, all 3 actions at once. How is the P200 different in this regard? So the P200, I know Dan specifically says not all cameras can do that, and that's true. They can't accept simultaneous commands because the packet doesn't accept. So not all NDI PTZs can do that. That's what he's saying. And I do know that that's true. So yeah, that's something that's built in where we're sending all the commands for the joystick with values in them. And so when you change the value and you like do this number, those values all change behind the scenes and they allow the camera to adapt. But not all programming is like that. Not all NDI cameras, in particular HX cameras, can do that. Some can, but not all. And so that's what he was saying there in that video. Now that's for the P200, that video. The 240, the promo video for the 240 also says that, but that's a part of the Bird Dog programming. And so that's, I believe, what he's driving at there is not everybody can do that, and ours can. And so you get that out of the gates with the purchase. You couldn't show us that because when it was on preview, we couldn't see it unless you show it on the screens from vMix. Oh, I see. Yeah, so it was just in the little, it was like up here, it was really tiny. So you may not have been able to see that unless you meant on proxy rather than preview. Yeah, I did mean it on proxy. That's exactly what I meant. Sorry, I'm going to have to send a request through your website. I need this feature for my job. What was the feature that you requested? That is a feature request that you could make. No guarantees how quick that would get done. There are 2 other major projects that are about to be undertaken, but it's a great idea, and you should definitely submit it to the help desk, and we will definitely put it as a feature request, 100%. That's a great idea. But don't expect it next week, because that's not going to happen. Just shooting straight with you. It's not going to happen quickly. Can we try the failover method right now? Sure, go for it. No problem. Yeah, this is a funny thing about the comment delay. We're kind of getting there. The failover capture could work, so let's try it. By all means. I'm going to keep answering questions here for a moment. Yes, an option to upload a screensaver image would be super cool. And also, then you'd really need to change the password on the camera, because that could go south real quick. Somebody hacked into your camera and uploaded photos. Yeah, that could be a problem for people. It'd be quite nice if there was a low res live feed from the camera to the UI so that we know what we're doing if we're doing it on the remote end. Okay. There are no guarantees here. All right. I'm not an engineer and I'm not promising anything. So we need to open this portion of the show with that. But that's what RTSP is. And if you go over to the Silicon 2 announcement, RTSP is listed on there. So let's just hold our horses and see what happens. I have not spoken to any engineers about that being integrated into the web UI, but you can't do 140 megs and you can't really even do like 6 or 7 megs. That's low res NDI. Okay. So proxy is like low res. So you can't do that to a website. But if it was really compressed, maybe. And so that's what the RTSP is one of its functions. And then sky's the limit. So Silicon 2 might be an option there. Might. I have, again, not spoken to anybody about the reality of that. But from what I know of other cameras that do that, that's what it is. So keep your eyes open. Stay alert, folks. Stay alert. I would imagine that you've already on the network and connected to the camera UI, you could use something like Studio Monitor, unless maybe you weren't using a computer. Not RTMP, RTSP, right? Dog.tv. Is it SIL2? Is that what it's called? The website. Hang on one second. Silicon 2. Let me look. Yeah, RTSP is what I'm talking about. And it allows for the encode, but the camera line, well, anyways, we'll see. We'll see. I have no idea whether or not that's a reality or not, but we shall see. RTSP, there it is. So Jose is responding to GoWeb. Yeah, and that's how things are done now. You can open Studio Monitor, just change it over to low bandwidth, and then you can adjust things on the web UI. That's what I do. I mean, I keep it on full bandwidth just because I like to see everything and all the detail and all the busyness and all of the, if we're getting any kind of like noise or anything like that. But yes, that is generally the workflow right now. What he's requesting is having it built into the web UI, which is possible, but it's also down the road, we'll say. That's down the road. It's all good. It's great to see a company that will work with this community. You know, that is really something that I love about Bird Dog, is that they're, even when guys go on Facebook and they yell and they scream and they want to flame us, or they're mad because something didn't work the way they thought it would work, or full disclosure, maybe we miss a deadline, or it's not as easy to build it as we thought it was, and so it's taking us a lot longer or something like that. Even that way, the leadership of this company is really good about stepping away from the emotional element that obviously they're being yelled at, but stepping away from the emotional element and boiling down, okay, so what can we learn from this suggestion or request or complaint or whatever, and like really digest it into something that is better for the customer in the end. And sometimes that means that it won't be fast enough for the guy who wants it now, but it will be made right for customers in the future. And we're one of the only companies that are doing a full NDI FPGA NDI product. I mean, flat out, we're one of the only ones that are doing this. And the team, like the NDI5 update, when it came out as beta, like it, seriously, I was very surprised. It was very like, and I've seen a lot of betas and I've seen a lot of ideas and I've seen a lot of stuff in the years that I've been here. But this one was really a huge step forward for the customer in mind. And I was really stinking happy about that. You know, like it seemed like they really took a page out of, we want this to be the best possible experience for the customer. And it's, you see that a lot of the logic that is like ingrained in engineers has gone away and the emphasis is on usability. And you get folks that, oddly enough, get upset because, well, I've been in the industry for 30 years and how dare you tell me not to use the OSD to make changes and I have to use your web UI. And it's like, yeah, but for like 98% of the world, they actually really like being able to go to a single place, not have to click on a remote wheel to change values. You know, they can make things, do changes quickly. They can set it all up and get it up and running. Now I watched a video from somebody today, and he was promoting a different camera line, and he pulled up the web UI and he was showing where to make changes. The web UI was just atrocious. Like it looked like it had been made on a Windows 3.1 computer. Like it was like these like really terrible drop down menus, and it was these like, oh, it was like the background was black and the text was gray and the boxes were white with black text. Like it was clear that like nobody had taken time to think about the way it looked, and they had just stuffed all of the things onto a web UI and called it good. And it's like BirdDog took, I mean, apart from the engineering portion, you can do these things simultaneously. But I know that I know that the marketing department took more than a month designing the web UI so that customers would naturally know where to find stuff, and that it looked pretty, and that it looked like it made logical sense, you know? And, you know, I've been writing them for a long time about you need to make this stuff, you know, more customer focused. I won't say I had anything to do with the way that the end product turned out because I didn't, but like they're getting to the point where they're spending more resources on the customer's experience. And I think it elevates BirdDog well beyond what other and one of the, I was reading through the comments section from that video I watched today, and one of them said that, well, the only camera that's comparable to this one is the BirdDog 4K camera, but it's almost $3,000 more. And I was like, fair enough. That is a 4K 1-inch sensor on that camera that he's looking at. But like, when things go wrong, who are you going to call to service that camera? And like, when things go wrong, where are you going to go to look for it? Like, there's no explanation in any of the web UI. There's no online tutorials about how any of this stuff works. There's no live support show for people to chime in and like work on this. And it wasn't a Sony 4K 1-inch sensor. And so the black levels were all off, and it looked kind of like washy, and it looked kind of like, you know, it wasn't that broadcast standard that Sony and Panasonic are known for. It was kind of something else. And so I don't know. I at the end of the day, you know, my musings, I look at the NDI5 update, and some of the under the hood stuff is really exciting because it actually lightens the IT load a little bit. But there's a standard of excellence that comes with when you buy a premium product. And you know, it is nice when a company will listen to the community. It takes a lot of time to make those changes, by the way. The ship is big and the rudder is small. And so you have to make those changes methodically and intentionally, and release a beta for a month and a half and listen and take it on the chin sometimes and let people beat you up some. But yeah, I mean, the NDI5 update is a lot more user-friendly than the LTS update was, or that previous web UIs were. Not saying that they were, I mean, they were a lot nicer than our competitors' web UIs are right now. But I think this is a huge leap forward and sets a standard that that people are going to be chasing for a while. So it's good stuff. maybe a pop-up that could be open. We're talking about the RTSP option whenever needed to see the feed from the UI. Yeah, and you know what? Bird Dog Cloud actually does this where you can set the thumbnail refresh to like a second, and then it just sends, excuse me, it just sends like a JPEG every second to show you what's being done. Maybe that's the way to do it initially, but I don't know. It would require another process. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's Balu cut on here. Who are you going to call? Ghost Bird Dog. The Bird Dog Web UI is the best that I've ever seen on a PTZ camera, and the NDI encoders and decoders comparing to the rest of the world's devices. So I had a brief run in with a Panasonic controller and a Panasonic one of their 4K cameras. Beautiful camera, and if I'm being fair, really nice image. Good image on that camera. What really stopped me from like giving it a good go is how hard it was to access the stuff. The controller had like a bajillion buttons. They all had individual functions, which is fantastic. But if you go onto the web UI, it was a dumpster fire. And the camera itself too was also really hard to use. And it had NDI, but it, you had to buy the HX license for $800 on an already $6,000 camera, which I thought was bizarre. But like it's just included at that point, just include it. But anyways, you had to buy the license, so they sent us a trial license and yada yada yada. And it just was hard to use. It was just not user friendly. It was like you had to be a broadcast specialist just to kind of be familiar with it, and that's lame. So I didn't like that. And then I opened up the P4K web UI. This was in the LTS days. Man, it's just like click, 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 adjust the black level, adjust the exposure, and it's like big buttons, white balance. Like how do you screw that up from a customer standpoint? Anyways, I don't know. But seriously, go ahead. I mean, anyway, go ahead. It's but yeah, people have their preferences and they want to use stuff, or maybe their video's sponsored by a certain manufacturer. And like Bird Dog clearly sponsors mine. I'm a Bird Dog employee, so you better believe that I'm going to be touting the strengths of this company. But I don't know of any other camera I would want to use in this realm. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to. I see other cameras, and I just don't think I don't think the Panasonic lens is as nice as the Sony, and I don't personally think that the PTZ options that are on the market right now are they don't look as good as ours does. And so, like, just quality wise, I think the picture looks great, and yeah, I think ours is out in front, and that's a subjective. I've played with these cameras for hundreds of hours at this point, and I know how to tune them, and I know how to get performance, like how to get them to look right and to behave right and all that sort of good stuff. And so I would prefer to use a Bird Dog camera. That's all. It's just my preference. Go Web. Yeah, you're going to get a call from Panasonic soon. They have to find me first. Hey, Panasonic, if you want to come and have a chat, I'm not opposed to that. Tuesday, Thursdays from 11 to 12. I would love to chat with you about NDI in the broadcast and the broadcast realm. I'm not opposed to talking to anybody about this because it's something I'm passionate about and I believe in, and I think Bird Dog's doing a great job of it, and so I'm always interested to talk to others about that. So good times. Good times, everybody. That's that P110 up there. As I told you earlier, and maybe some of you who weren't here, I have a Bird Dog Flex Out that is now running a vMix multi-viewer that's in front of me here. And so my eye line is probably a little bit lower than it normally is because I used to have a Blackmagic monitor that was right under the lens. And now I have this like 17-inch screen that's basically showing me every angle that I have, and it's being output via vMix. It's going into that decoder. So pretty stinking awesome. Good stuff there. Thursday, Bird Dog Play Day. Yes, I will do everything in my power to have a play up and running, and maybe I'll grab that little Blackmagic monitor and we can have a little look-see and see how things go and play around with it a little bit. So let's plan on Thursday doing play, reviewing it, looking at it, giving it a run for its money. I wrote it down as a note, and after this show, which is 45 minutes overdue, by the way, I just get talking and I just don't stop. After this show today, I will set up Thursday's show, and we're going to talk to Ian because he's going to be at a live show, and so I'm going to definitely have him on. It's always good to have him around, and he is a sales engineer here in the U.S. and super cool guy. Lives in California. Yeah, just excellent sales guy, really down to earth, and has come on board here in the last year. Yeah, I like him a lot. And he kept the Red Bulls coming at NAB, and so thus is where I got my Red Bull reputation, and partially due to Ian. So I think one of the owners were like, "Oh, John, he's a Red Bull guy. You got to watch out for that guy." And I'm not a Red Bull guy. I'm drinking this energy drink, which I've never had before, G Fuel. It tastes all right, though. It's the blue can, since you can't really tell because of my lights. But anyways, and it's sponsored by Ninja, the dude on Twitch that's like the most infamous Twitcher around. But yeah, good stuff. You must have another note laying around there somewhere saying M4250 basic settings. Well, which do you want, play or M4250? Gosh, yeah, we need to do a show on the 4250 because things are evolving with NDI5, and you should definitely know about it. So, how about next Tuesday? I'll make 2 shows because I can set up multiple future shows. I'm gonna make 2 shows. Go Web, Mr. Full of great ideas. And Thursday is going to be all about Bird Dog Play. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to try and get as many answers as I possibly can. And we're going to talk about Bird Dog Play on Thursday. And the next Tuesday, we're going to talk about the M4250 and basic settings on 4250s and how you should live your life. So come back for the next couple of rounds of the support show, and we'll definitely do that with you. And yeah, we're going on an hour. This show has been on for almost an hour and 50 minutes since I kicked it off. And I started it late. I didn't really even have much of a pre-show. So, boom, there you go. Anyways, okay, but you want me to do play first. So I will do play on Thursday. All right, folks, I better wrap it up. I love hanging out with you guys. And seriously, the Bird Dog community is what makes this brand. And so we're not much without you. And so thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming on board. As always, thanks for hanging out in the chat. If you have questions or you have concerns, by all means, hit us up at help@birddog.tv. If you need to open it, that'll open a ticket for you. And my team, who is trying to fill in for Senseless, who has fallen by the wayside as sickness has overcome his mortal domain, we're all trying to so translation, he's sick. And we're all answering tickets to try and keep up because that dude is a machine. And yeah, and we're hiring him some new employees too to help him out. So that team is getting more robust. I'm really excited about that, and you should be too. And so yeah, those folks are starting. Basically, 1st of November is when that team is starting to get geared up and trained. And I'm really excited about that. But if you have a question and you need to find out something between now and Thursday, hit us up at help@birddog.tv. This is our support desk. I've got guys here in the U.S., in Michigan, that answer these tickets. And we're all trying to do what we can to float along while Senseless is out sick. But if you have questions about the product line, if you just don't know, like, I'm thinking about buying a Bird Dog Play, can it do this or can it do that? Hit us up at hello@birddog.tv. This group of guys is the pre-sales team, and we have guys all over the world that are in this desk. So hello is great for pre-sales questions, and help is great for post-sales questions, support questions. Okay. And of course, I talk about anything and everything on this show. So Tuesday, Thursdays, you know what? I'm going to totally make a ticker here. So let's say Bird Dog Live, and then I'm going to say Tuesday, Thursdays from 11, 12 ETUS. All right, ready? So I am on twice a week from 11 to 12 or 1, chatting with you here on Bird Dog Live. And so you can hit us up at birddog.tv. Actually, better yet, you can hit me up at birddogjohn.tv. And that is my YouTube page that I'm trying to build up a little bit. Thank you to everybody who's subscribed to that channel recently. That's a huge help. We jumped up like 5 subscribers last week, which is, a drop in the bucket for most YouTubers, but for me, that's a big deal. So thanks, everybody. But yeah, we're trying to grow that channel so that we can get our own little handle. But we have a DNS redirect, which is actually easier than a YouTube handle, birddogjohn.tv, and that will take you to my page. And we talk anything and everything over there here twice a week from 11 to 12. So that's the easiest place to subscribe to this show and know what's going on. Another great resource, which I always like to throw out there, is Eastern Shore Broadcasting. This is a guy named Tom Sinclair. He has been in the business for a long time, over 10 years, and he is a great wealth of knowledge when it comes to live streaming. So subscribe to his show. If you look up Eastern Shore Broadcasting on YouTube, you'll find Tom, and subscribe to his show. His show's on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. So hit up Tom. He's a great guy to know. And he does a lot more than just Bird Dog stuff, but he is a fan of Bird Dog as well. And so I've been on his show and he's been on mine. And I love to throw him a little shout out because he's a great guy to know. So join us live from 11 to 12, at least to 12, sometimes after. Maybe I should change this to say 11 to 12 plus, right? Because that's probably more accurate. So 11 to 12 plus Eastern Standard Time here in the U.S. I'd be happy to have you on the show. Please subscribe to birddogjohn.tv. And if you have questions, drop those in the comments. Let me know whatever it is that you need to need to know. And if I don't know, I will honestly tell you I don't know, and I'll try and find out for you, because that is the premise of this show. Is I'm not going to jerk you around with lies. That gets you and me nowhere, and it just generates tickets and distrust in the industry, and we don't want any of that. So if you come here, you ask me a question, if I don't know, I will definitely try and find out for you. Hey, how's it going, Sanaya? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. In the meantime, though, hit us up at help@birddog.tv. And if you have pre-sales questions, you just want to know more about the products, hit up hello@birddog.tv. And those guys are amazing. I can't tell you enough. Our pre-sales team in this company is aces. And so, yeah, definitely shoot up a message if you have any questions about the product line. They can help you there. If you've bought a product and you're having any issues or you have additional questions, help@birddog.tv. My boys will give you a hand over there as well. And in the meantime, of course, take care of yourselves. Like I said, Bird Dog community is what makes Bird Dog the best product line out there. And so I truly believe that. And you guys jumping on the show and being here with me and asking questions and keeping the show rolling is always a great thing. Really appreciate you guys. And I cannot wait to be back with you on Thursday at 11 o'clock to at least 12. And we are going to talk about Bird Dog Play for all of you who are interested. And so hit us up then, and we will see you then. Take care of yourselves. Be good to one another. And we'll see you in a couple days. Cheers.
Kids, you tried your best, and you failed miserably. The lesson is, never try.